The Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience. Let's talk some fantasy football. 2020 season. Let's do a bit of an intro to see what we're dealing with before we tackle on the rankings, where we should be drafting certain people. What's the landscape of fantasy football entering the 2020 season? I've also pre-recorded 4 intro running back shows with Chris Meany and Joe Pisapia, where we go player by player, running back by running back. And the ADP we use is probably a bit antiquated by the time that it actually comes up. We still talk about each of the players and where we think that they should project to go and which ones we like, which ones we don't like. It's a great way to get yourself reestablished on what actually happened last year, where we project going into this season, the situations we're dealing with in the backfield, and if news changes, well, shit happens. But there's going to be 4 shows. They're like over 4 hours in total content. We had a lot of fun recording them, and it was a great refresher to wrap my mind around everything. Today, we're just going to talk about the overall landscape, how early drafts are breaking down, where the value rests, some players that are just pumping up draft boards. And I know that there's one player in particular that we're going to hit on bigly, because this person that I'm talking to on the line, Davis Mattek, spoiler alert, from sportsgrid.com and dailyroto.com, is big on this guy. But before we do that, remember to smash the like button for the episode, and in the comment section, tell me who your 5 starting picks would be. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The top 5 in your rankings for half-point PPR for the 2020 fantasy football season. Also, if you want to get into a draw for 100 DraftKings dollars, subscribe to the Pat Mayo Experience audio podcast. We've got a ton of content coming out for you over the next few weeks, every single day, as we do. You leave a 5-star review, a DraftKings handle, and something you enjoy about the Pat Mayo Experience, and you are in that draw for 100 DraftKings dollars. Also, if you're into golf, because there's millionaire makers out coming up, fantasynational.com. Check that out. It's free for the moment until golf actually returns, so it's the only time the site's ever going to be free, not behind a paywall. Highly recommend that you go do it. If you have an email address, you can go check out what's behind the paywall at fantasynational.com. No credit card that you have to put in, just go enjoy it. And it's going to be free to use up until Colonial, so if you want to get into the DraftKings Millionaire Maker and pretend to know what you're doing, highly recommend fantasynational.com. I talked to him. He's wearing Rachel Maddow glasses. It is Davis Mattek. What's up?
Not technically Rachel Maddow glasses. These are my blue blockers, Pat. This is so I can get a full night's sleep despite staring at my computer all day long.
Is that okay? My wife got one of those while she was pregnant, like halfway through while she was still at work. Like she was getting migraines, so she got a pair of those glasses. She said they really helped. She only ever used them at work, though. You find that they're helpful?
Yeah, I mean, I use them every day. Like I use them like on the iPad before bed. When I'm watching the Clone Wars or whatever. I find them to be super useful. I find them to be like a night and day difference in terms of like how I feel.
Well, if people want to hear me and Davis talk more about glasses and things like that, part 9 of our Corona Cast series came out on the weekend. Those are not quite evergreen because stuff changes all the time. I have no interest in going back and listening to all 9 episodes because I can't imagine how horribly wrong we would have been about things in episode 1 and episode 2. I think it'll be a decent chronicle, though, of like what we knew at the time, how we were experiencing it, in like a year's time to go back and listen to, though.
It would, I mean, definitely would be interesting to see, because I would imagine like the chart of like how worried I am goes up and then goes down and then probably peaks again at some point. So I imagine that'd be pretty funny to go back and listen to.
Well, I'm currently off on paternity leave, so hopefully I have a brand new son with me at home as people are watching this and tuning in, whatever. This one will be somewhat longer lasting because it's fantasy football. It's not like it's starting anytime soon. So I'm going to have a bunch of fantasy football shows, like I mentioned, coming out. I've already done some rookie stuff with Jake Seeley from theathletic.com. We went over the rookie rankings and where those guys would rate in a rookie draft and a dynasty draft and where they might fall in the overall season-long rankings, which is, frankly, not super highly unless you're like a for sure running back. So what are your big takeaways just from the overall fantasy football landscape as it is? Because the first thing I've noticed from like the early drafts that I've seen, and I'm talking about redraft here, I'm talking about auction, I'm not talking about best ball because I don't want to talk. Best ball is a crutch for content creators. They're fun to play, don't get me wrong. But when people are like, whoa, I draft him in best ball, like who the fuck wouldn't you draft in best ball? Honestly, Davis.
I mean, there are a lot of guys that don't fit the profile there in best ball. I mean, best ball really though is if you're trying to get money down on these drafts right now, you are doing best balls. I mean, I've done best balls, I've done regular, I've done dynasty, I've done all these drafts all off season, but best ball, you're certainly more inclined to take some guys in best ball as opposed to non-best ball formats. That is true. And it is a crutch to be like, oh yeah, you take McCole Hardman in best ball because you don't have to decide which week to start him or whatever. So I get what you're saying about the people using best ball as a crutch for sure.
So we're going to be talking about your standard redraft. We'll talk about it in the framework of half-point PPR. But really, realistically, the difference between PPR and standard, there are outlier players when it comes down to it. But I think that people put way too much impact on, well, he's a PPR guy, you can't draft him in standard. No, maybe the value is a little bit less, but I think that sometimes guys that we think of as PPR players actually hold a lot of value in standard leagues because they just get discredited right off the hop.
Well, I mean, you still get points for yards. Really, the only thing that should change a ton in how you're thinking about PPR versus standard is that you should just be weighting guys with like real touchdown ceilings higher than you would in a PPR format because touchdowns just swing the whole thing.
Yeah, and the big thing with it, like even someone like James White, who in a PPR league historically would be drafted like 8 rounds higher in a PPR than he would, but it's not like he had no value in a standard. Like if you get a catch, that's still an opportunity to touch the ball. Like if he has 5 carries and 8 catches in a game, that's just as good as someone with 13 carries. Now, maybe some of those are goal line carries, and that's a factor that weighs into it, but it's not like James White would be devoid of value.
I mean, you'd rather have even in a standard league, you'd rather draft a running back who got 60 carries than 100 or 60 receptions as opposed to 120 carries. I mean, even in standard leagues, receptions are worth so much more. They gain more yards on average. They're more likely to turn into touchdowns. It's just like pass catching backs are, it's already here, right? Like you would just rather have those guys than, your LeGarrette Blount types.
Well, the big thing off the hop that I've noticed from some of these early drafts is the first 4 rounds, running backs. That's it. We've now gone back. 0 RB didn't work.
It's dead, man.
0 RB didn't work that one year. Everyone jumped on board, and it's completely swung back to the way that it was.
Yeah, I mean, so we are getting guys who were left for dead, just completely pushed up draft boards. We have Todd Gurley, who was, basically not even a functional human being last year, just looked awful, was not a good player, bad PFF grades, bad yards per carry. His team cut him, and he is being drafted as the 24th player off the board right now in high stakes leagues. A great resource for ADP is fantasymojo.com. You can get, I think it's like a $10 subscription for a year, and you can get, all the high stakes leagues ADPs. And so over the last 7 days in the Football Guys Players Championship, Todd Gurley, Leonard Fournette, Melvin Gordon, David Johnson, Chris Carson, and Le'Veon Bell are all going as picks in the first 3 rounds. I mean, try telling yourself that 2 months ago.
I mean, I get that. Not all of those guys, but there are some of those guys that I would want on my team this year if they were a 3rd round pick, depending on how you structure your first 2 rounds. Like, I think that Todd Gurley could end up being a good value this year. I think
so too.
I think you and I generally have fundamental disagreements on how to draft fantasy players. I am realistically only concerned about volume. That's it. Like, talent is great, but I will take the shitty starter who gets 270 carries over the highly talented backup who might not see the field.
No, I don't. For running backs, I don't care about talent at all. I think that where we might disagree is that I think the floor for the Gurley, Fournette, Melvin Gordon types is way lower because just year after year, we see the market be really overconfident in guys like that, and then they get hurt or they get benched. Or really the worst type of running backs to draft are the guys who, don't really get a ton of work at the goal line and don't really get a ton of work in the passing game, but they get super overvalued just because they get a ton of work in between the 20s. Ben Gretsch, who works at CBS, has this great metric he found. Like basically he calls it a running back's trap number, and it's just a measurement of what percentage of their touches are those low value, carries outside of the 20. And I mean, like before last year, like Leonard Fournette was like the best example of this. Like he never caught the ball and he never really was getting, tons of usage at the goal line. He just ran hot for 1 year. And those are the type of guys I do not like to draft. But this year, I mean, I think there's a really good argument that, Todd Gurley might catch 60 passes this year if his knees hold up.
Yeah, for him, it all depends on his health. Like Quadre Olson,
Yeah.
your main man, Brian Hill, Judge Ito.
Right.
Like, these aren't the guys that are going to take his job. His job will be taken by injury.
Yeah, so I have no concerns about him getting benched, right? Like that's just not going to happen. They signed him to the deal for, they didn't draft a running back. Everyone thought they were going to draft a running back. They didn't. So I don't actually really have any concerns about Gurley's usage as long as he is healthy. Like there's not a Darrell Henderson there, right? Like last year we had the Darrell Henderson that really kind of suppressed his ADP. I mean, if they don't draft Darrell Henderson, I think even with the knee concerns last year, Gurley's still probably, a tail end of the first round pick. And, we just none of these other guys are any good either.
No, and it's funny, last year, it was the knee that held Gurley back eventually based on his limited reps. Henderson eventually got involved, but Malcolm Brown was really the guy that came in to steal his actual value in a lot of these games.
Yeah, so Malcolm Brown, I had the 2-touchdown game in week 1, but overall, Malcolm Brown just did not play very well. He was given opportunities, specifically that San Francisco game, and he just was no good. He averaged 3.7 yards per carry on 69 rushes, was only targeted 6 times in the passing game, Malcolm Brown. So, I think actually that's a really important observation for this year because I think Cam Akers might end up being one of the running backs that I end up drafting the most just because I'm not afraid of Malcolm Brown, and I think that the team's pretty much moved on from Darrell Henderson.
Well, I think Cam Akers is a really interesting one because there are people who are exceptionally high on him and his fantasy prospects off the hop, but he's still. But I think that's where I get into a situation of the Twitter draft analysis people being like, "Well, this guy's clearly so much better than the other 2 guys that are already there," but then that doesn't make a difference because the other 2 guys already know like the playbook.
Yeah, I have no opinion on who's better between Cam Akers or Darrell Henderson, but it would be a very strange decision for the Rams as a team to trade up for Darrell Henderson. Look at their roster. The Rams roster is just a nightmare. They have no talent anywhere, and it would be a strange decision to look at their talentless roster and be like, what we need to address our complementary running back to Darrell Henderson. So I would imagine Les Snead and Sean McVay drafted Cam Akers with the idea that Darrell Henderson is, just not really going to cut it as an NFL player.
I get that logic behind it too. But the one thing I noticed about Darrell Henderson last year and just what his skill set appeared to be was he was very slow getting to the line. But if he ever got the opportunity to run off tackle and turn the corner, he was fucking fast.
Well, that was the position that he played in college. Like Darrell Henderson was not even really, like a starting running back in college. He was a complimentary player. Wait, no, that's actually not true. That is not true at all. Tony Pollard was Darrell Henderson's backfield mate. But Henderson, he played at Memphis, so he never played against really, really good players, I guess, would be what you would say is like, why was this guy so good in college? Yeah, he actually averaged famously over 8 yards a carry in college. Like everyone thought he was going to be great. I thought he was going to be great. I was very taken aback by how poorly he performed as a rookie, but it's just kind of one of those things.
Well, I'm looking at a 12-team high-stakes league right now, and just using one league for reference isn't always the best. But hey, this is Pat Mayo experience. We're not going to do a ton of research here. This is what we're going to do. Cam Akers, where do you think he went in this draft?
I bet Cam Akers went in the 4th round.
5th round.
And I think he's a huge value.
I don't think how is the 5th round for Cam Akers huge value though? Like, and we kind of hit on it too. Like, you expect that if Gurley's the main guy in Atlanta, that he could more than, like, if he gets up to 60 receptions, that more than doubles his reception total from last year. Goff and the Rams and Sean McVay don't check down or pass to the running backs all that often.
Well, they did a ton when Gurley was healthy, and I think that my presumption would be that a large reason why they stopped targeting Todd Gurley in 2019 was because he completely lost the ability to cut upfield. You watch Todd Gurley from 2018, you watch him in 2019, they look like completely different players. I think a large reason why they wanted to draft Darrell Henderson, and they said this last offseason, was they wanted someone to play a Chris Thompson role, is what Sean McVay said about Darrell Henderson. And it never happened because Henderson, didn't figure out the playbook, didn't know how to adjust to the zone blocking scheme. So I would imagine they do actually really want to throw to the running back because, Gurley in his 2 seasons with McVay, 64 and 59 receptions before his knees gave out on him. So I actually think there's a pretty healthy receiving floor there for Akers if he turns out to be, good enough to play.
Yeah, if he turns out to be the guy, obviously that's going to be the value in the 5th round. He should be a 2nd round pick if that's going to be the case. But it can swing the other way where this guy's just not playable all year.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think that's true, and I think that's why you're getting any discount on him at all. I would imagine that at some point this discount is just going to evaporate, right? Like if Sean McVay says, Akers is the starter, if he comes out and starts the first preseason games, very optimistic, obviously, that we would even get preseason games at all. But there's going to be no discount on him, right? He is going to zoom ahead of Mostert, Singletary, Le'Veon Bell, Chris Carson. Well, maybe not Carson. Carson actually probably is a guy who is going to move up draft boards because everyone was sort of expecting them to draft a running back, and they didn't end up doing that. So I think by the time we get to August, September, Akers is going to be, actually very similar to what we saw with Josh Jacobs last year, where he started out going, 3rd, 4th round, and then ended up being a 2nd round pick.
Yeah, he never really ended up being a 2nd round pick. He was usually always available with the 3-4 swing. That's where he ended up going in real drafts. Because we do these shows, Davis, shockingly enough, to talk to people who might actually be drafting, not guys that, I don't know, in your crazy sphere that are spending $10,000 per league. There's a difference in high stakes league with the way that those leagues are actually structured, because it's not because most of the giant ones in the high stakes leagues, there's value in going off the board and not making a ridiculous pick, but making the all upside pick, because you don't only need to beat the 11 other people in your league. You need to beat everyone who signed up for this thing. That's not how fantasy football normally works.
Yeah, so when we in the Football Guys Players Championship, this ADP that I'm referencing in the FFPC main event, the NFC Cutline Championship, you'll see all of the high upside running backs get pushed up 6 rounds, right? Actually a great example last year is routinely Justice Hill and Devin Singletary, Darwin Thompson, and this was before the LaShawn McCoy stuff. We were seeing those guys go, and literally I was in an FFPC main event where Justice Hill went in the 7th round. That's just kind of the stuff that was happening.
Yeah, and I can speak pretty confidently about the Chris Carson and Josh Jacobs from last year, because I had basically those 2 guys as my starting running backs on almost every single
Jacobs
team.
Was awesome. And
I got him at the 3-4 turn. If I picked 12th, I usually went Michael Thomas, someone else, usually Kelsey, Thomas, Kelsey, Carson, Jacobs is essentially how I started 3 of the 5 drafts that I did.
Yeah, Jacobs was. I think it's very likely that Akers ends up being the comparable guy to Akers this year, Jacobs last year. I think those guys end up being really comparable in usage and value. Because it might be that Akers doesn't play a ton of passing downs. Maybe they do get Henderson in there more on passing downs, like Oakland used Jalen Richard and DeAndre Washington on passing downs, but he just ends up being a value because he is the lead back pretty much from day one. I think Jacobs got 21 carries in that Monday night game against Denver. Really wouldn't surprise me if Akers comes down and gets that many carries in his first game as a Ram too.
It wouldn't be surprising to see Akers do that in his first game as a Ram, but it was clear that that's why Jacobs was drafted. I don't think it's as clear that's why Akers was drafted to the Rams.
Yeah, for sure. So right now, the team just hasn't said anything. We have nothing from McVay. We have nothing from management on their plans for Akers. It's all very much reading the tea leaves of drafting a running back in the 2nd round the year after trading up to draft a running back in the 3rd round. So I feel pretty confident though. I get on a confidence interval from 1 to 10. I'd put it at a 6 that they drafted Akers to just, be the new Todd Gurley. But, I certainly would not bet my life on it or anything.
Well, let's talk about some rookie running backs before we jump to the top of the board. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is probably going to be drafted in the first round now. Is that where he's going to end up going? Like, I think there will be leagues where people are a bit more pensive, but there's all it takes is one. And you're the guy who's the one. So if you're in a league, you'll probably take him in the first round. If the league doesn't include Davis Mattek, there's probably another Davis Mattek type who will take him at number 9 overall. I would wager in most leagues he's an early second round pick, though, when all shakes down.
Yeah, so right now I have Clyde Edwards-Helaire ranked as my number 11 player. He goes off the board as running back 14, pick 22 on average. I clearly am on the very optimistic side here, and I think the frustrating thing would be if you do draft Clyde Edwards-Helaire this early, there definitely is a scenario where he has a season very comparable to Miles Sanders's rookie year, where he really was only used in the passing game, was not getting any goal line work, kind of over the first half of the season. Then the incumbent starter ahead of him, it was Jordan Howard for Miles Sanders. It'll be Damian Williams for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Then that guy gets hurt, and then the guy takes off like a rocket ship. Now, again, it's reading the tea leaves of why did the team make the decision to draft him where they drafted him. And to me, it would be very bizarre for a team that has as many needs on the roster on the defensive side of the ball as Kansas City to spend a first-round pick on a running back and then give a 28-year-old undrafted free agent, more carries, more touches than Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And also, I think that the touchdown upside for CEH is I think the only one that can match him is Elliott. Really, I think that's the only guy who can score as many touchdowns at a 90th percentile as Clyde Edwards-Helaire could.
Yeah, I guess Dalvin Cook could also be in the very high end of that just because he's the guy. And even with the split with Madison, it could work that way. And you lose Diggs. Maybe they have to lean on him a little bit more in the red zone. Unless they were so impressed by the Boone King in the final 2 weeks of the year that they go back to Mike Boone. Doubt that's going to happen. Although there's always like a CJ Ham stolen touchdown along the way.
Yeah.
Always. It just is going to happen, especially the weeks that you roster Dalvin Cook. But I think that there's a clear, distinct line between Clyde Edwards-Helaire and the rest of the rookie running backs, not necessarily in terms of safety, because I agree with you that this could go wrong for an extended period of time if Damian Williams, the incumbent, just is still the incumbent, and they work in at Clyde Edwards-Helaire throughout the course of the season. By the time, like, the Miles Sanders owners figured this out the hard way last year, is that, yeah, it's great that Miles Sanders went off, but by the time he did it, it probably didn't mean much to your fantasy team anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably I've spoken to a lot of guys who do projections and tried to get a sense of the situation. I think what a lot of people are projecting is for Damian to be the 1A for the first month of the season, Clyde Edwards-Helaire being the 1B, and then a transition point after that. I think that's probably a reasonable expectation. And if they are, in a 60-40 split or whatever, like Kansas City's second running back still might be a top 20 guy in fantasy just because they pass so often. So, more of that running back's touches are going to include that free point for a reception. And, just being a running back in Kansas City is so easy. It is so easy to score points and score touchdowns as a running back for that team that, even the 1B there can be a really valuable player.
Yeah, and I think that's what separates him from the rest of them. That, let's say, like you said, that if Cam Akers is the guy, he's undervalued in the 5th round. And I would agree with that. He should probably be like a late 2nd round pick in that Rams offense. If it somehow turns out that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is the guy in Kansas City from day one, he should be considered a top
he should be like the 3rd pick. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the argument that you make for taking him so highly, but it does come with a bunch of risk. But then you got the other rookie running backs, like Jonathan Taylor is like around basically where Jacobs is going last year, like somewhere in the 3rd round. Maybe he falls to the 4th. People aren't paying attention. That's probably not going to be the case. But I don't feel super comfortable with him or DeAndre Swift. I just don't want to own Lions running backs.
Yeah, no, thank you. Well, we just won't draft any of that guy. Someone else can take him.
Yeah, like he might be good, and he's going in like the 4th round, but he's going ahead of guys like, let's see here, like he's going ahead of Chris Carson right now. And like Chris Carson is an unsexy running back, but Chris Carson is a very reliable guy who, even with his massive fumbling problems, just always gets his job back.
Yeah, I mean, I think that best case scenario for DeAndre Swift, which would be that Kerryon Johnson gets hurt, he still isn't going to be the guy because they are still going to use, Ty Johnson still on the roster, Bo Scarborough still on the roster. They actually, this is, it seems that no one caught this during the draft.
It's Patriots light, man. That's all it is.
they drafted another running back in the 5th round, like a pure pass catching running back, Jason Huntley, like a small school guy who's just going to be in there to play third downs. And like, losing those 10 snaps a game when you're already going to be splitting snaps with Kerryon Johnson, and you might lose some other work to Bo Scarborough. It's like a stone cold disaster. This is, of the 32 teams that Swift could have gone to, this is maybe the worst.
And I don't feel as comfortable with Taylor either in Indianapolis, because there's the clear-cut case where he's just the guy, and then he's ultra valuable. But with Rivers on the scene, I mean, Nyheim Hines is going to have value, and it's not like Marlon Mack isn't there. Now, I think that they drafted Taylor to be a better version of Marlon Mack, but I guess I wouldn't be completely stunned if Mack just got 0 run at all. But if all of a sudden Mack is playing 20% of the snaps or 25% of the snaps, he's not valuable, but he's just sucking the life force out of Taylor.
Yeah, very, very real scenario where we get, DeAndre Swift gets 60% of the carries, but he's not playing much on the passing downs because they have Nyheim Hines there. And, I don't know. I was never even a Kerryon guy. Like, Kerryon Johnson was going tail end of the 2nd round, beginning of the 3rd round last year. And I guess it is a little bit of a suck out, like that he got injured or whatever. They were maybe looking like they were going to use him more. But Lions running backs, like, what's the use? They haven't had 1,000-yard rusher since like 2001.
Yeah, and like I talked about Carson, where he's going, like Matt Breida is going ahead of him. I'm not even entirely convinced that Matt Breida is gonna be the guy in Miami. Like, doesn't Jordan Howard do this every year where everyone discounts him and all of a sudden he's just getting 20 carries a game?
Last 7 days, I see Breida as RB 34, 81 overall, which that feels appropriate to me.
Me too. But I'm looking at this high stakes draft that just happened over the weekend.
Okay.
And he's in the 4th round ahead of Chris Carson.
I mean, that's absurd, right? Because, I mean, let's not forget, he's also going to lose third down work to the best pass protector running back in the NFL, Patrick Laird. So let's remember that.
Your Laird and Savior?
Our Laird and Savior. I mean, look, man, like, that's so annoying to people to think about, but Laird is going to make the team and he's going to play third downs. That's just going to happen.
Well, the second-tier rookie running backs are all kind of going in a cluster. So you have Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's like first, second round where he's going. Then you have Taylor, seems to be the clear number 2 coming off the board. Then Swift is the number 3, which just I don't like whatsoever. And then you get into this territory where you have Cam Akers, Keyshawn Vaughn, and J.K. Dobbins all going like start of the 5th round type value, but it's right around the same place that David Montgomery is going. And I don't like David Montgomery, but I would much prefer to take David Montgomery over all those guys. Like, if we're trying to mine volume from running back,
he's locked into being a starter.
He's the guy. He's not good. The offense isn't good, but he's the guy. We know that. Yeah,
I mean, he is going to get 70% of the running back carries for that team and should get, or more, right? Because they really have soured on using Tariq Cohen. And I think Montgomery sucks, but I'm like a stone lock to have him on a ton of my fantasy teams this year.
He's actually shaping a lot. Like, his value this season reminds me a lot of where Chris Carson's value was last year. Like, just no one likes him, so they don't want to draft him, but they understand that he's in a really good situation for fantasy points.
Yeah. I mean, I 100% agree with this. I think that's very. I think it's very analogous. I mean, I guess other than the fact that Montgomery doesn't play in a good offense, right? Whereas Chris Carson plays in offense, we expect to score a decent amount of points because his quarterback play is so good. Yeah,
but even like Keyshawn Vaughn going over Ronald Jones, like there's a situation where neither one of those running backs is really worth all that much. Like,
I'm not a Keyshawn guy.
Are you team Tampa's going to be really good? Because I'm kind of team Tampa's going to like not be great.
I'm team the market is completely overrating the risk or completely underrating the risk factors here, which is like, okay, one, maybe Brady can't do it at all. Like maybe he just physically is not able to do it at 43, or maybe Brady is able to go out and be Gardner Minshew, which means he's really going to struggle on those deep balls. And, people have their opinions about Jameis or whatever. But one thing Jameis was able to do in this offense was, throw the ball deep to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And that really made a lot of the other things in that offense work. And I also think, one of the things people forget is so much of that production in Tampa Bay last year was garbage time.
Well, because Jameis created that garbage time. If you think that Brady's going to be a super efficient passer who protects the ball, everyone's numbers across the board are going down.
I think a very likely scenario is that Godwin has like a Julian Edelman season, but on crack because he's so good. So like he has like a really phenomenal, 100 catches, 1,400 yards, 12 touchdowns, like some crazy season because he's so good. But Evans really struggles. Gronk basically is a part-time player. OJ Howard frustrates everyone. Cameron Brate ends up catching 5 touchdowns to tilt everyone. Like I think like a super, super frustrating fantasy season is definitely in play for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I am not one of these people that is out here talking about Tom Brady, taking over the league, betting over 10 wins. Their total right now is 10 wins, Pat.
That's in that division's. It's not good, but it's not
like good.
Even it's it is and it isn't. Like Atlanta could very well be 6-10. They could be 10-6. Like they're one of those teams. New Orleans is going to be good. Carolina just has a really shitty defense, but they're going to be able to score.
Bad.
But they're going to be able to score points.
Yeah, I mean, Teddy should be an upgrade from Kyle Allen. Curtis Samuel, Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore is a really good wide receiver grouping. We think Ian Thomas is a pretty good tight end. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey is, a good NFL running back. So, yeah, like I think it's going to be a lot tougher for the Buccaneers than everyone is anticipating because everyone thinks Tom Brady is a superhero and he just might not be.
No, and listen, we could be the complete ducks and all of this and just be like, oh yeah, we were completely wrong. Tampa was 13-3 and they were awesome. But you're paying for that in these fantasy drafts already. Like that's what you're paying for. It's like betting the over on the 10 wins or betting the 12-1 to win the Super Bowl. Like it's not getting any better than this. It reminds me a lot of the Browns from last year. Like Chris Godwin is going inside the top 24. He's going as he and Mike Evans are both going as top 10 receivers right now. You have Keyshawn Vaughn, who no one really knows anything about, going in the 5th round, but you still have Ronald Jones going in the 6th round. Yet no one seems to want to draft Tom Brady in any of this. Like, I actually think
Brady goes high.
Brady in this ended up going. Where's Brady at here? He was outside the top 10 of quarterbacks.
Brady has been going on average as the 8th quarterback off the board, which it seems insane to me.
Well, if you have the choice between in fantasy, and this is what we are talking about here, Brady or Josh Allen, the answer is Josh Allen.
Yeah, I mean, I think guys who are going after him, Matt Ryan, Daniel Jones, Carson Wentz, I would prefer all of those guys.
Daniel Jones is shaping up to be a really good fantasy player.
Yeah, if you told me that Daniel Jones finished as the number 1 overall quarterback in fantasy while the Giants won 7 games, I'd be like, yep, that's pretty firmly in the range of outcomes for Daniel Jones. If you just, don't look, guess how many times Daniel Jones fumbled last year? Just guess.
Ooh.
He started 12 games and appeared in 13.
Appeared in 13? I'm going to guess it's somewhere around a fumble a game.
18.
Are you serious?
Plus an interception a game.
And this is, and the way that I would try to think about this is that just sounds like a very Jameis season to me. And
he's super Jameis-y.
And if you go back and look at who was good at fantasy last year, Jameis Winston was.
Yeah, and Jameis doesn't really run, but Daniel Jones runs. Like Daniel Jones added, I think, 250 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. So I there's just a very real scenario where the Giants suck, but Daniel Jones is really good.
Yeah, it's a lot of it's not quite the same case I made for Josh Allen last year when I basically called him discount Cam Newton because he's just going to call his own number at the goal line every single time because it works. And he's not a great passer, but he's going to run a whole bunch. That Daniel Jones averaged 7.5 carries a game. Like, that's good. Like, break out one decent run every 2 weeks, and it's like an extra touchdown on the board.
I mean, yeah, literally. And Brady has access to none of that, right? Brady will not add 50 rushing yards over the course of the season. Daniel Jones might add 400, which is 3 free touchdowns.
Yeah. So what's the optimal scenario for the Tampa Bay offense? Because the only guy that I'm really considering drafting in that offense right now, because I actually think that they are a good value, is Gronk. Just all of a sudden Gronk's Gronk and you just spend the money on him because he's not going highway. He's like a 10th round pick. Fuck it. I'll roll the dice on Gronk. Why not?
Yeah. I mean, if Gronk is physically, fine. Like he's good to go. I can see him having a value because we just, every year tight end just ends up being such a nightmare in fantasy. I mean, I can see a scenario where all of these guys do pay off at their ADP, where Brady shows up. He's 2016 Brady again. He's throwing darts to Godwin. He's hitting Evans in stride. Like Gronk, Gronk just is cleaning up on a lot of these drives. Like I can see it. I just don't think it's the most likely like median outcome.
No, I would tend to agree with that. And like Gronk amongst tight ends right now is going around like Blake Jarwin, who's not going to be good in this offense anymore. I hate to tell you.
Yeah, I mean, his target expectation is going to go way down. They did lose. I mean, they had 4 different players last year see 83 or more targets. So there is some room for him still, but not as much as there would have been before they drafted CeeDee Lamb.
No, who do you think ends up with more targets in this offense, Zeke or Blake Jarwin? Because I would go with Zeke.
Oh, Jarwin for sure.
You think
I don't even know. Zeke might not get 40 receptions this year.
If that's the case, then he should not be going as a top 3 pick, I don't think.
Well, I mean, the same argument you make for Edwards-Helaire goes for Zeke, which is that he's going to get an opportunity. I mean, he's going to get an opportunity to score. Like he could have a 20 touchdown season and no one would blink.
No, that's true. You pay for that upside. Like Barkley, you could throw into that mix too. That if the Giants are just behind in a lot of these games, but he could
catch so many passes.
Catch all the passes. Although Daniel Jones didn't do a whole lot of checking down to Saquon. That was mostly the Eli games where he piled up receptions. But if they just get down by a bunch, yet he handles every touch inside the 5-yard line, he could score 20 touchdowns. Plus, he's Saquon Barkley, and he has like 5 60-yard touchdowns in him. Zeke doesn't have that.
Yeah, I mean,
Zeke doesn't have that like Barkley does.
No, but he plays in an offense. The Cowboys led the NFL in yards per play last year. They seem like the best team to do that again this year. So, he just is going to have an opportunity they're going to have so many drives that are going to end in points.
Well, let's talk about these top running backs because it seems pretty consensus that 1, 2, 3 off the board overall at running back is going to be Christian McCaffrey, Zeke, and Saquon. And you could go Saquon, Zeke, but those seem to be the 3 guys. Is there anyone who is close to those 3 at running back, do you think?
No, I think it's those guys. I think that's a tier break. Then Cook and Kamara are a tier break of their own. And then I think there's a pretty sizable 3rd tier.
See, I'm more down on Kamara than I think most are. I see the upside and where the upside comes in. And if he hits it, then yes, he is probably by far the fourth running back that you're going to want to have. He could be the number 1 running back if everything breaks right for him. I see so many different opportunities for things to go wrong for him because, as we know, Drew Brees, noted socialist, enjoys spreading around the wealth. So that can always go one of 2 ways. Latavius Murray's going to steal touchdowns, whether people like it or not. They go out and draft a freak tight end that no one knows about, but he's going to end up being like, he'll have 5 touchdowns. Like there are so many different places to funnel the ball in this offense that it's hard for the optimal outcome for Kamara to hit. Like I see Cook outscoring Kamara 7 out of 10 times if we ran a simulation of the season. And I see the same thing for Derrick Henry too.
I mean, Henry definitely fits your mold of just draft the guys who are going to get the most touches. Kamara, though, is a very good argument for it's not the most amount of touches, but you want the high value touches. And pretty much every touch Kamara gets is a high value touch. It's he's out in space. He is, getting a ton of looks around the goal line. Like when Alvin Kamara is healthy, they just force feed him the touches you want him to get, basically.
They do, but like he ended up touching the ball on 53% of rushes inside the 5-yard line for the Saints last year, went to Alvin Kamara. It's only like 35 inside the 10, 35 inside of the 20. I know he was hurt for a few of those games, but it's not like he was out all season. And a big knock on him his first 2 seasons was he was so hyper efficient that no one could sustain at that level. And it went completely sort of the other way last year, that there's probably a happy medium, but him getting back to those peak efficiency numbers is going to be really tough.
Yeah, I mean, I think very similar to like the people who are championing Austin Eckler right now. Like it's gonna be hard.
I honestly think that Austin Eckler is a bad pick. Like it's not even the efficiency numbers. It's nothing like that. Not having Rivers as his quarterback is going to be especially tough.
The check down king. Rivers is the check down king of all time. Like he loves to throw to running backs. And now Eckler's going to be playing with Tyrod Taylor or Justin Herbert. Not gonna. I mean, I don't know. Like, I agree with you. Eckler is not a good value where he's going. I loved him. He was a great guy to have in Dynasty. But I mean, this is a classic mistake that people make in life in general, Pat, is people don't want to buy the distressed asset. They want to buy after they've already seen it. And that's not the time to buy anything.
No, especially when you have a prototypical running back that just doesn't rate as a guy who's geared for 20 carries a game. Like, I know that his receiving overcomes all that, but go back and look at Tyrod on the Browns, Tyrod on the Bills. Not a big check down guy. He's more of a
running quarterbacks don't throw to running backs. This is like it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, he's a more pull it down and run it for myself type guy. Like Tyrod, if he ends up starting, could actually be a really good fantasy player this year.
Yeah, I mean, running quarterbacks always. And Tyrod has been a good real-life quarterback before. Like, not good, but like a fine enough real-life quarterback in the past. So I think there are just a lot of scenarios where things go poorly for Austin Eckler this year, including they might just give Justin Jackson, because Justin Jackson's a fine pass catcher too, and has performed fine when given touches in the NFL before. So I can see Justin Jackson just eating in to a ton of Eckler's volume.
And there is buzz around Joshua Kelly as well, that not necessarily that he's going to take over, but if all of a sudden, like, Rivers was so generous with dumping the ball off to Eckler that even if Eckler was playing 48% of the snaps and not getting goal line work, once Melvin Gordon had returned, it didn't really matter. It did. He wasn't a top 5 running back anymore. He was like a fringy top 10 guy. But that's just not going to be the case anymore. That if he's playing 45% of the snaps or even 55% of the snaps, he's just not going to have the same value.
Yeah, I mean, and it's important to note that Melvin Gordon's like completely done, just is not a good NFL player anymore. So of course he wasn't going to really.
Oh, but he did steal a lot of those touchdowns, and he was a benefactor of a lot of these blood dumps from Phillip Rivers as well. Just no matter who's standing next to Phillip Rivers, he's going to throw them the ball. But
so what I'm saying is
I think that Gordon, like you mentioned, Gordon off the hop, like Gordon is going around Fournette, Taylor, David Johnson, Bell, James Conner, and Aaron Jones. Like that's sort of the range where he's in. He does not fit into that mix for me at all. Like I think he's bad.
Yeah, I mean, I also think he's bad, but I also think Denver clearly plans on giving him a bunch of touches, right?
I don't necessarily know that. I think that they want him to be their lead.
I mean, I will not be drafting him.
They want
for
him.
Sure.
They want him to be their lead back, but their lead back might be a guy who touches the ball max 60% of the backfield touches. Like they still have other guys to give the ball to.
I will not be drafting Melvin Gordon, but if he did a zombie Melvin Gordon season where he walks ass backwards into 14 touchdowns, I'm not gonna, Denver just does stuff like that. So I could see it.
Oh, sure. But you're still then paying for that where he's currently going. Like, I think David Johnson is horrendous this year, but if David Johnson is going to go 17 picks after Melvin Gordon, I don't see a huge gap between those
I'd rather have David Johnson.
But Chris Carson's going after both of those two guys, and Chris Carson is just objectively better at fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Carson is objectively better. And it does. I mean, it seems crazy to me that he would be going after Melvin Gordon. Certainly not the way that I would rank that or think about that. I have Melvin Gordon, very, very low in my rankings.
So Miles Sanders is going as a fringy first round pick. Like in some drafts, he's going ahead of Chubb or Gurley or Jacobs or Aaron Jones or any of these guys. And other ones he's going after them. It depends on how much you believe in Miles Sanders. But every single time, the water is clear. He's Moses the water in the backfield. Yeah, maybe Boston Scott eats in a little bit, probably not. But every rumor that you hear about running back signing, it's I'm going to go to Philly. I'm going to go to Philly. Yep. I'm going to go to Philly. That
100% of the time.
That worries me that maybe Miles Sanders isn't going to be if we're looking for pristine running backs for fantasy football, we want them playing over 75% of their backfield snaps. There's a chance that Sanders isn't that guy.
I think it's a super strong chance that they don't plan on him being that guy, right?
If that's the case, then there is no draft where Kenyon Drake should go behind Miles Sanders.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is very good reason. I think there's a very good reason to think that Kenyon Drake has both a better floor and a similar upside to Kenyon Drake, or to Miles Sanders rather.
Yeah. So I think I would take Drake ahead of Sanders. I could see, I think I would take Drake over Edwards-Helaire as well. I know that upside isn't quite the same, but Drake has a substantial amount of upside. And I don't buy any of this shit about like Chase Edmonds, like really eating in. Like, he's not going to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of the reasons for not being into Kenyon Drake would be like structural, where you'd be like, it's very uncommon for running backs to change teams at this age, hold up physically, get similar workload. Like you're like, if you're looking for historical comps, like you're just not going to find that many. But I know that in season, when we're sitting there looking at drafts, people just don't like to hear those structural ideas, and they just want to draft the players that they like that will do well. And Kenyon Drake is definitely one of those players.
Yeah, and like I think that Joe Mixon, along with everyone else, is set up for a really nice season. We'll see whether or not he holds out, but I think I would take Drake.
Or if Burrow is really good, because there's some chance that Burrow gives you Andy Dalton, 7 yards per attempt level production, and that will make Mixon probably a little overvalued because there's not going to be a ton of touchdown upside there if Burrow's not good as a rookie.
But like I think it's a coin flip between him and Drake. I think I might even take Drake. Like I'm big on this Arizona offense, but I'm not big on any of its pieces besides Kyler and Drake. Like I don't like I think Hopkins is going to be good, but like Hopkins is going like early second round, late first round. Like I'm not entirely convinced that he replicates the same production. He might be more efficient, but just the bulk numbers that he was getting with Houston.
the whole concept behind the air raid, this offense that Arizona runs, is like to not overload one player and to use all your players, use your top players to distract, to create space. Like I would not imagine Cliff Kingsbury is dialing up a 100-yard or a 100-catch season for DeAndre Hopkins.
No, I think that the top 2 wide receivers are far and away better than everyone else. Maybe like I'm on an island with this. Maybe you agree. I really haven't read anyone else's stuff, but Thomas and Adams are probably top 5 picks.
They are going as Thomas and Adams are going as the wide receiver 2 or the wide receiver 1 and 2.
They should.
Yeah.
Like, I don't see what the argument against those 2 guys is. With the guys behind him. Like I love Julio. I like Hopkins. Tyreek Hill is the only one you can really put in there, but like week to week, he can go away. Like those 2 guys don't go away if they're playing.
Yeah, and I mean this might be the year for Adams, right? Like if he doesn't get hurt this year, we are talking about like an insane target season, like just like wild stuff, because they have very little else in their pass game. So I agree.
Yeah, so that's where Hopkins was. He was a part of that tier because of the overall volume and lack of competition that he was going to see. Now, I'm just wishy-washy on that. Like, I can't confirm that. But the touchdown upside for both Adams and Thomas is higher than everyone else's at receiver. Their target share is going to be higher than everyone else's. And their volume per game is going to be higher than everyone else's. I think that's, like, I guess my thing would be, like, after those 3 running backs that we talked about, McCaffrey, Barkley, and Elliott, Michael Thomas is probably the next pick. But then you get into that Cook, Kamara, that type of thing. Like, I don't know yet if I would take Adams at 5, but I would think about it.
Yeah, I think so. The reason why he's not going to be a very popular pick at 5 with some of these other running backs on the board is that wide receiver is so deep. I mean, you're sitting there in the 10th round drafting wide receivers you like, and running back gets like that clip gets empty very early, very quickly, basically, is why you won't feel comfortable taking Adams there.
I don't necessarily agree with that. And this is kind of the point of this show, is to break down where everything is happening. Like I spent a first round pick on either Thomas or Travis Kelce in a lot of drafts last year. And it turned out to be okay because I hit on my running backs when I drafted them either in the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th round. Like I said, that Jacobs-Carson combination wasn't like the nuts at running back, but it was good all year. And you could kind of piece in everything else. And I had a huge lead by having Kelce and Thomas. Those were 2 very consistent players that I didn't need to have Christian McCaffrey on my team in order to have a good team. Obviously, you need to get lucky or make a nice pickup along the way, but that's any team that you draft. So I'm not going to worry too much about that. I just want good players with the picks that I make them. That, well, 0 RB might be dead. There is a case to be made that Thomas and Adams, like, them on their tier is worth more than all of the other, like, wide receivers deep. Like, if you take one of those 2 guys, you might not have to take a wide receiver again to structure your team to like the 6th, 7th round if you don't want to.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is true. I just, again, it's like, so would you rather have Devonte Adams and
Kenyon Drake, let's
Aaron
say.
Jones?
Let's say
What's that?
would I rather have Devonte Adams and Kenyon Drake over having Dalvin Cook and Drake, or Dalvin Cook and Kittle, Dalvin Cook and Julio? I think it might be Adams and Drake.
It's pretty hard to do that because Drake is now kind of creeping up into the back end of the first round. But yeah, I mean, the problem is that second tier running backs, Nick Chubb, Josh Jacobs, Aaron Jones, Austin Eckler, Todd Gurley, like those guys, immediately we are getting into like screaming, blazing red question marks about all those guys.
Yeah, well, I think that their upside is better, but I would almost even look at that if you want to go receiver, you could finagle a way to get Adams and Kittle, Adams and Kelsey. It depends. Like, I don't think that Kelsey's going to be a first round pick when it all shakes down. I think that they're both.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
But like, he's going in the first round in some of these drafts, but I think he's a second round pick. So let's say you started Adams and then Kelsey. What are you left with? Well, you miss out on that Aaron Jones, Melvin Gordon tier, but you do have the Carsons of the world available to you. James Conner, Le'Veon Bell, guys that no one wants, but are volume running backs who could very well be running back ones this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fair point, and I mean, another attribute to this point would be that there's not, in terms of range of outcomes, like there's not really that much of a difference between some of these guys who are going in the third round and some of these guys who are going in the second round at running back.
Yeah, but there does seem to be a precipitous drop off at, like, I even mentioned David Montgomery. Like, if you want to go receiver, tight end, first two rounds, it's probably not optimal, but you could go running back, and end up with three guys that you like.
Yeah, three guys you like. I mean, just like, so historically speaking, if you look at the way like the ranges of drafts fall, running backs drafted in the third, fourth, and fifth round have like by far the highest bust rates of any position. Like, because these are generally guys who are getting drafted very highly on the presumption of volume, and then they either get bad volume, they lose the volume, and they're not efficient enough to make up for it. So I like, while I agree with you, like when we're talking about these players, and I'm like, yeah, I think David Montgomery is a value where he's going. Would it surprise me if he gets banged up and Ryan Nall comes in and plays better than him and he gets benched? No, because David Montgomery sucks. And so I think that's stuff I try to be cognizant of when drafting. Like, yeah, I think specific values of these players might make sense, but historically speaking, this is a very bad bet.
Well, I just think that, like, the Kamara, Cook, Henry, Mixon, Drake, maybe Clyde Edwards-Helaire are sort of a second-tier group of running backs. Then you have, like, Sanders, Gurley, Jacobs, Eckler, Jones, Fournette. Like, that's
Sanders is in that second group for me. I think he has so much upside.
You're right about the upside. And if I'm going to put Clyde Edwards-Helaire in there, you have to put Miles Sanders in there, the way that we've talked about them. But, like, I don't think that there's, like, one of those second-tier guys could be the best running back in fantasy football, and where the guys in the third tier probably will not be. I think that those two tiers are a bit, like, interchangeable once we look at the results at the end of the season.
Yes, yeah. That point is true for sure. Yeah.
Where I do think that if Thomas or Adams don't get hurt, because, like, health you can't predict, but if those guys play all 16 games, like, they're going to be top 5 receivers.
Yeah, I mean, if those guys don't get hurt, I mean, if Michael Thomas doesn't get hurt, it's very hard for me to even see us. I mean, I guess maybe if Drew Brees gets hurt, but even that didn't really stop him last year. Like, yeah, Michael Thomas is just going to finish as the number 1 overall guy.
No, because that number 1 overall is usually dictated by touchdowns, and touchdowns inherently are just more difficult to predict.
I mean, Michael Thomas might re-break his own record for receptions, though.
Yeah, but Devontae Adams had just the same market share and as many targets and receptions per game when he was healthy last year. He just got hurt.
Yeah, I mean, that actually probably is going like a little bit under the radar, like just how insane Devontae Adams' volume was last year, I guess, because he missed, I think, 7 weeks with injury.
Yeah, and maybe that's not, maybe prorating that out is stupid, but at the same time, if I'm looking for elite players at their position, that was always my thing about Travis Kelce last year, was I had Kelce rated so much higher than Kittle in Ertz for the upside that he presented. That didn't even really hit. He was the best tight end, but if you had drafted Mark Andrews in the 14th round, you were doing better. But you had to draft,
be a lot happier.
But you had to know to draft Mark Andrews in the 14th round, or Darren Waller, wherever the hell you got him, and like that was your plan. I know a lot of people ended up with those players, but that wasn't plan A, put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I really liked Andrews and Waller last year. Last year was a good year at tight end. I don't see any obvious corollaries to those guys this year, though. Looking down the board,
I think
at tight end.
I think the corollaries that you would have to make if you wait on tight end, that there's like a cluster of them. It's like Fant, Gesicki, Hawkinson, like that type of guy, like breakout potential, just monster.
Gesicki is probably the guy who has the route to enough volume and enough upside in that offense, because and also Waller really Waller was not on a lot of championship teams, because once Hunter Renfrow was like the full-time slot starter there, his numbers got a lot worse. So it really was Mark Andrews, and Mark Andrews was attached to an offense that scored a lot of touchdowns, and for Gesicki to get there, you'd probably Tua will have to play. Like Tua will have to become the starter probably.
Well, it's funny if Fitzmagic ends up just keeping the job for a while. If Tua's not healthy, he's not ready, whatever it is. But Preston Williams is healthy. Preston Williams was the one doing damage in that offense. It wasn't until he got hurt that Parker started going bananas.
And that Gesicki became like a full-time player also.
Yeah. So I don't know if that reverts back to how it was with Williams healthy, because Albert Wilson's still in this offense. Like, they have guys, and they use them in really weird ways.
They have a lot of guys, and they play them all. Like they are very comfortable rotating all those snaps basically. So that is a good point. I mean Gesicki was playing a ton over the second half of the year though.
Like Gesicki is going in the same range as like Austin Hooper, Evan Ingram. Tyler Higbee is somehow going ahead of these people, which I just do not understand.
People love it.
He just screams bust.
Yeah, I don't think I've drafted Higbee once yet.
Like, I can't envision myself ever drafting Higbee over Evan Ingram.
Yeah, I like Evan Ingram. I like Evan Ingram way more. I mean, there are some guys here. So like, Fant, I can see an upside season being there from him.
Ian Thomas,
Jonnu. I don't really see it from him.
What about Eric Ebron in Pittsburgh now? Like, you can make a pretty strategic bet that, because all reports are indicating that Roethlisberger is washed, he's fat, he sucks, that if somehow you get 95% of Roethlisberger back, everyone on the Steelers is a great pick.
I think a lot of the Steelers are going to be great picks. We haven't mentioned James Conner's name yet, but I did.
He was one of those running backs in the, if you went receiver, tight end, that if he was your third round pick or even fourth round pick in some of these spots, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, right now, I think he is going as like a tremendous value, because there really was not a bigger winner of the NFL draft than him. He doesn't, his backfield competition now is the guys who sucked last year,
and
Jalen Samuels and Benny Snell and Anthony McFarland, who, like, whatever. I mean, running back doesn't matter. Like, I'm not saying he is better or worse than James Conner, but Conner is going to get the chance to be the incumbent again. I'm sure of it.
Yeah, like James Conner and Le'Veon Bell are just two guys no one wants, but they're the guys. Why? If that's your, because Bell is dropping even to the fourth round. That if you were able to get Conner and Bell potentially, or Conner and Carson, based on where they're going right now, like, I'm not that upset with that. If I have elite guys at the other positions, like if you wanted to reach and take Lamar Jackson in the second round, which I wouldn't do, but I know that people will do. Like, those are the running backs that you back it up with.
Yeah, I mean the new zero running back might be like, just accept having shitty running backs. That might be the new wave.
Yeah, except having three of those guys and just throw in Montgomery as the last one, and hopefully two of them work out.
Yeah, I think that is a scenario that I could see playing itself out for sure.
Yeah, and like I'm not suggesting don't take Christian McCaffrey at number one, or even or whoever you have rated really highly, but just don't think that you have to take a running back, because we've just talked about a whole bunch that are available in the third, fourth, and fifth round that you need to be good. But shockingly enough, if you make bad fantasy football draft picks, your team's gonna fucking suck anyway. Who cares?
Yeah. I mean, if you make bad picks, you're gonna suck. That is true.
Lamar in the second, Mahomes in the third. That's where you're seeing it.
That's where I'm seeing it. I mean, that just means I'm not going to get to have those guys. But it was great. It was great being all in on Lamar last year, and now we got to do it again. We got to find someone else new.
Is Daniel Jones going to be that guy?
Daniel Jones. I mean, Kyler, like when drafts like started in like February, you could get Kyler in like the 8th round, but that's pretty dead already.
That's not happening now. What's the round do you think? This is our intro to the season, but like 6th round, take Kyler?
Oh, I mean, yeah, take him there. You won't get him. Him and Dak are going to go in the 4th and 5th round for all of this this preseason.
Who would you rather have, Kyler or Dak? I think I would take Kyler.
I have Dak 3, Kyler 4. I probably will change that 20 times before the season starts. I think why you would go with Dak is that he is just a proven touchdown rusher. He has 21 rushing touchdowns over 4 seasons, and they use him around the goal line that way. Why you would go Kyler is they are like a mortal lock to lead the NFL in total plays run. So that will just give him some extra yardage, some extra rushes and stuff like that.
When are we going to have the narrative that this is the ultimate fuck you Aaron Rodgers season? He just goes back to being the best quarterback.
I mean, maybe we'll get that narrative, but he just can't do it anymore.
He could have a really good fan. Like, I'm curious to see where he ends up going. Like, does he become like the Matt Ryan from like his MVP year where he's like a 14th round fantasy pick?
I mean, right now he's going pick 149.
Like, that seems like good value.
Yeah, I mean, he just has really sucked for fantasy for since 2016, really.
Did you see this this Aaron Jones number about when Davante Adams played and when Davante Adams didn't play? The Aaron Jones numbers.
I would imagine they're huge because it's hard for a running back to get his when a wide receiver is getting targeted on like 30% of the offense's plays.
Yeah, he basically scores double the amount of fantasy points per game.
Yeah, because they just use him and Jamal Williams on the field a little bit, at the same time and stuff. So I probably, Aaron Jones just to me seems like the most volatile asset in the top 24 picks right now. Like I can't get there.
All right. And AJ Dillon's now a part of that mix too.
Dillon, Jamal Williams.
How I don't know, back. But like who knows? Like that's why that's why I think that Adams is so good. Like he's very clearly the guy.
Yeah, like what's he gonna get? Is he gonna get out targeted by Alan Lazard? Like what's their plan?
Yeah. All right, Davis Mattek. You can follow him on Twitter at Davis Mattek. Check him out on sportsgrid.com, dailyroto.com, and subscribe to the Takecast and go back and check out all of our CoronaCast shows if you want to hear ludicrously bad old takes exposed, because that's probably what it's going to be. But I would subscribe because I am subscribed to Davis's podcast anyway. Go rate and review that 5 stars. After you rate and review 5 stars for the Pat Mayo Experience audio podcast, smash the like button to the video and check out all of my work up on dkplaybook.com. All right, more fantasy football coming at you because it's that time of year again. Starting a bit early because there's nothing to talk about, but hey, can't hurt, right? Everyone likes hearing about football. I'm Pat Mayo. I'll see you next time.
Pat Mayo Experience! Experience!